Welcome to DevOps Accents, a podcast on everything around DevOps, public cloud, and cloud-native topics, with your hosts, Pablo, Leo, and Kirill.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DevOps Accents. And we are the regular hosts, Kirill, Pablo, and I, Leo. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So this is just a short reminder that we are the MKDev co-founders, and we get together to discuss everything around DevOps and cloud native and all that stuff that get us together with you, with everyone in the community. So we've been quite busy recently from one conference to another conference. Come and see us in Munich on July 17th. We will be there. Come say hi and maybe win some prizes from us, just as usual. You will be able to participate in the giveaways, and the best way to not miss anything is to be subscribed to our MKDev Dispatch newsletter that we release every other week and share all the things that we think are important. Pablo was demonstrating his cool MKDev swag that he has from the past conferences. You can get this one if you subscribe to our newsletter and share just enough references. But anyway, let's start, because I was reading your intro to the recent dispatch, Kirill, and you've been talking about 37signals, like our favorite company. You said that there is quite a controversy in the community about the decision to move from cloud to back on premise. And there's something I've been thinking about, like how they've been calculating their expenses. And you said that by moving from clouds to on-premise, they saved a whopping $1 million.
$1.5 yes.
In 1.5 even. And I've been wondering, yeah, that's huge, but did they, of course they did they consider expenses other than infrastructure when they were calculating how much will it cost? For example, when you build a big data center, you have to take care of the electricity, of the taxes for the land, for the janitor that will clean all this area, for the heat management and all that stuff. Do you know by any chance if that is included in these savings?
Yeah, first of all, actually, it's funny because our very first episode of the podcast was also about this migration, because that was a bit over 6 months ago, and that's when 37signals announced that they are leaving the cloud. And now, my intro was about that they left the cloud. So they did it in 6 months, more or less.
Yeah, and this is impressive. Okay, it's just 6 months, because for me, I don't know what it takes to make this giant migration, but I was 100% sure that it will take them several years.
Yeah.
to transfer.
It is impressive. Like the velocity how they did it, just judging from my experience and Pablo's experience as well, is even for small companies way smaller than Basecamp or 37signals, it takes a lot of time to do such things, and not because they're technically complex, but just because things take time process-wise and bureaucracy-wise. Because you have to coordinate a lot, and because of the org structure, you have to do lots of alignment with everyone. But also technically, it's actually still impressive that they did it, because they not only moved from AWS to on-prem, they also moved from Kubernetes to their own container runtime called Maersk, which is like a very simplified bare bones container orchestrator they open source, like anyone can use it. I'm not sure it will become popular because I think it will be niche because people just want to use Kubernetes these days. But still, like they moved all this production infra for hey.com, the email service provider, plus all the other services they have on the cloud back to the on-prem in 6 months, including migration to another container runtime. So all the updating the deployment pipelines and things like this is just great. And I think velocity can be explained by many of the technical decisions they made. For example, they're famous for pushing for something called Majestic Monolith, because they're telling since many years that monolith is good. You just need to do it properly. So the application is monolithic. It's like basically one repository, one big Rails application, maybe sometimes with some, how they call it, outposts, some like dedicated smaller services for specific purpose. But majority of this is just this, like hey.com is one big Rails application, mostly, I think. Basecamp as well. And then it's easy also to migrate. You can just move things between clouds. If it's containerized, you can deploy it to any cloud easily, and you can also move it back to on-prem easily. Talking about your question about the cost, they are not actually building data center. They are working with the white label data center provider, which is basically someone handles the building, and they just order hardware. Hardware is shipped to this data center, and someone for this data center provider does all the cabling and racking and everything, connects everything, and just gives them remote access. So all of these things like electricity, the janitor, the extra power supply in case there is no electricity, all of this is handled by this company. So they did not build something from zero. And the second...
Sorry, Kirill, continue. It's because I want to see continue.
The second point that for them it was easy to calculate the costs because they are running on-prem since 2 decades, if not more. So they have the team experience in doing this. They didn't have to hire anyone extra. They basically, the operations team or DevOps team stayed the same. It's the same people they handled on-prem and cloud for the last couple of years. Before they handled only on-prem, and now they're back to handling only on-prem, except I think for the file storage, which is still in AWS S3. So they did not have to pay more for maintaining the hardware or data center. They didn't have to pay more salaries because it's the same people who are already super experienced in doing this. Because imagine you're the guy who works with this particular infrastructure for like 15 years. So like, you don't need to learn anything from scratch. You don't need like 2 years of onboarding. You already know everything. So
what I want to say is that at the end is, okay, I've been working many years, more than 20. But at the end, this is go back again to the past. It is go back to, because I remember many years that I had to go to the data.
Many.
Yes,
years.
because you had to go to the data centers to do the operations. So I remember many weekends in the data centers. So, but in this kind of data center that Kirill are telling, that is not a data center for a company. It's a data center for 30 companies. And then you go to this building and there is a guy who is asking you to what company do you go. And then you go to something like a jail and they open the block. Where are your machines? But maybe at this time, what you had there, it was imagine one bank, it was here, and in the other prison or the other jail, you have, for example, a travel agency or something like that. So it was a shared data center. So, and it was working like that always. But what happened? All this idea with the monolithic, they jumped to the idea of the microservices. And at the end, like always that happened, that everything is like the fashion. Now everyone go in pink. So we need to go in pink, everyone. Mm-hmm. So it happens something like that. So now, okay, let's move to Kubernetes. Or let's move to microservices. Let's move to, okay, and now? So what I mean is that not always is the solution. Sometimes it's even a problem because you have a team that is working with something that is working for many years and you jump to something else and you start to spend a lot of money because the movement to cloud is a good solution, but in some cases. The move to microservices is a good solution, but in some cases. But sometimes, if you are in your own data center, maybe you can save more money than if you move out. So, depends what you want to have. Elasticity, or you don't want to have elasticity. Depends everything. Then you need to take a decision.
Following trends might cost your company a lot of money sometimes.
Yeah.
what's like surprised me the most about the controversy around this their decision is like how people reacted, because they shared that they saved 1.5 million per year on that. And what proof do you need above that? Like, what else do you need? Like, here's the proof. We already saved like 1.5 million. And that is like one single point that justifies all the work that they've done. But after that, I've been thinking how much they were spending on cloud before that. Because, for example, what if they were spending like 22 millions per year, and now they are spending 21 million? and yeah, technically they
This is
said
a very good point. So do you have these numbers, Kirill?
I think they were spending like 3 million on the cloud, and now they will spend 1.5 for the same on-prem. But not for the same. They also improve performance.
okay, 50% cut is huge.
Yes. Now it's a big difference. So
Yes, 50%. That's a huge number, and yeah, the performance part. Does it really improve the way how the product works when you have it running on data center rather than on cloud? Because from my standpoint, it's the same. When we are talking about clouds, we don't actually mean clouds in the sky or somewhere else. It's just the same data center, and probably data center that is located next to you somewhere, because AWS has their data centers all around the world, and basically you have direct connection to some data center. And when they moved from cloud to on-premise, they just switched data center. Does it really improve the performance, the connectivity speed?
You have to understand, like, so the idea of the cloud is that they have lots of hardware, and all the cloud services, the idea behind cloud services is that they slice it in the virtual capacity units. So the originally virtual machines, but now the serverless functions. But the way it's being sliced is that when you have a virtual machine, it's not the same as running on the hardware. You have the kind of loss of software between your application and the actual processor or memory.
Mm-hmm.
And this software like translates all the system calls to go to the underlying
and you just
base operating
remove
system.
all these unnecessary layers.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like running things on the physical machine is always going to be way faster. And especially in the cloud, you don't know how many layers are there, right? Because when you run a Lambda function, it runs inside the micro VM, which probably runs inside bigger VMs, like some EC2 instances, which runs on the physical hardware. So that's one point, is that if you remove all these virtualization layers, it's always going to be faster. And that's also one of the reasons why some companies would use the cloud, but then keep some like big hardware machines just for like data science or like machine learning, just because it's way faster. So you can collocate physical machines, and then you can also get physical machines from AWS, but it just costs a ridiculous amount of money. So it's cheaper to just buy hardware, if you can manage to buy hardware, especially the graphics cards these days. But the second point is that when 37signals migrated back, and they posted a separate article on this, they ordered the latest and greatest hardware, which is probably not something you get from AWS, because in the end AWS is huge, so they cannot really replace all the hardware all the time to be the latest processor, the latest memory cards. And 37signals, they could just get the best server hardware out there and buy lots of it, and then it's also the performant one. So it's like, I think it's two sides how they got this performance boost.
Okay, I have to remind that they made a calculation of, imagine, 5 years or 7 years, the time that they think that this hardware is going to be working, and they split it by 5, because I had to remind that the cost of all this hardware is more than 1.5 million. So maybe it was, imagine, 7.5, and they divided by 5, so they said every year is going to cost to us 1.5. So I had to remind that they made this kind of calculation, no?
Yeah, and they posted all of these calculations in the blog post. So the CTO, DHH, he posted in his blog post, plus they also posted on company blog post some details. And yeah, it's over the time, but they already, like, because migration is already finished, so they're not spending. They said like they spend 300K per month on hey.com, or actually, like in total, they spend like almost 300K per month. So now they don't spend 300K per month on the cloud. They spend maybe like 50K because they still store all the files there.
Crazy, eh?
The most interesting part for me in all this is not hardware or the actual work that they did, but the manpower that, or women power that was involved in the process.
Come on, please. It's manpower.
Okay, I agree. Bad joke.
Come on, please. Manpower, woman power. What is next?
Okay, anyway. They did like a lot of preparation, and before they, I genuinely would like to get to know their thinking process and their decision making process. What led to that? Because when you are discussing something internally, probably there was the same level of controversy inside the team that we are facing today outside, and there were people who were immediately agree with that, and there's people who disagree with that, and at the end you need people who will be able to maintain and make this transformation possible. And how do you find these people in the first place? And you already, Kirill, mentioned that they most probably they didn't hire someone from outside because they have a lot of history on their own of running infrastructure on premise, and they already had all the needed experience. So it was easier for them. But if we are not talking about them or some other companies, you need for all the team get on the same page and be agree on that. And for that, if you need to find someone on the other side from outside the company and to hire new people for that, how you get aligned with the idea that you need to make this transformation? Because I imagine you invite some person on the interview and they and you tell them, we are looking for an engineer that will help us to migrate from cloud on premise. And this guy replies to you, oh, what a stupid idea. Like most of the people on the internet that commented on the articles from 37signals. How do you do that? And how you work with these people, and how you even find a person that will agree to do this kind of job? Like not to do the job, but will agree with your idea that this is something that should be done?
I think that when you have a big reorg, because this can be considered not a reorganization in the company, but can be considered a reorganization in the infra. The first thing that you have is a lot of meetings. And you need to have many meetings with the people, and not only with the infra team, you need to have a meeting with everyone. Because this is a very good point, because at the end you are going to change the whole atmosphere of the company. And you're going to jump from a cloud company where you are recruiting people from internet. Okay, we are working in AWS, or we're working in Google Cloud, or we're working in Azure. You're going to jump to a company that is going to sell the new positions, like we are working in on-premise company. So we are not using cloud anymore, and we are an on-premise. And some people can consider that, wow, this is not cool. This is not nice. So this is important first, because normally I don't know how is this company working, but normally the boss is not the owner. Or even the owner is not the one who can take all the decision, because there is a committee on top, or member of the company, depends. So first you need to go up to down, and later on down to top, because first you need to tell to the people on top, okay, we're going to do this jump because we have these expenses, and if it's 1.5 million for for 5 years. For 1 year, 5 years is 7.5, and 7.5 millions is a lot of money. And even if you are increasing the company 8% per year, and even with the inflation, you can consider that it's not going to be 7.5, maybe it's going to be 10 or 12 millions, the saves in 5 years. So then this is okay. The company says, the bosses says, okay, the management board says, okay, this is okay, let's go to save 12 millions for the company. But now you need to go down, and later on down to top. You need to convince all these engineers. You need to convince the architect, because it's not only convinced, they need to accept that this is possible. Because you need to, it's like Kirill was telling, they even have their own container application. They need to be able to move everything and to prove and how many POCs. And when I'm talking about POC, it's not a 2 years POC. It needs to be a fast POC, and then they need to do an MVP. And when everything is working, they said, okay, we have a plan. And then, okay, do we want to do that or not? Because the problem is that there is no way back.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone needs to be convinced. And I have to remind that many people, many workers are not happy with that. Because when you turn on the TV, you have AWS, you have Google Cloud, you have Azure. And when you turn the TV, you don't have anything like go back to the data centers. There are no data center companies making advertisement. So it's like go against what the society is telling to you. Go to the cloud, because everyone is in the cloud. But do you need to be in the cloud? No idea, but okay, I'm in the cloud. So, and this is the hard part. But when everyone is convinced, I think that, and again, always there will be people not happy, because always there are people that is not happy in whatever situation. So when you have majority of the people convinced that this is the best and is proof, and now even is in the in the mouth of everyone, because there are many people talking about what happened here. So you can see that many other companies are doing the same movement, and this is good for them, And I think it's good that not everything is in the cloud, because
that's really good for them. And the main point that you mentioned is to make everyone convinced on the idea, and that would be the most difficult part. But I want to make this as useful for our listeners who out there and listening to the podcast and probably are looking for a new job in cloud area, DevOps, or something similar. And for example, they get an interview with a company, and they say to them, we are going to move from cloud to DevOps, to on-premise. And as a DevOps engineer, you will be helping us doing that. So from your own perspective, from the height of your own experience, is it something that easy to agree on? Does it even take, do you need to have some experience with this kind of migration? And this is something rare. You might have a lot of experience with migrating from on-premise to cloud, but there are not many companies that did otherwise. And do you need this kind of requirement for the people who will do this kind of job? So do you need to be prepared for that, or when you hear this on the interview, you might say just like, okay, I will do that, and you will explain to me everything on the go. So what our listeners need to be prepared for if this happened to them?
Do you think your project infrastructure is well set and maintained? We know for sure there is always room for improvement. If you are uncertain where to begin, let's first do an audit of what you already have. We will review your setup from every angle: performance, cost, security, high availability, and automation, and provide you with a detailed roadmap of which direction your infrastructure should go, generate concrete tasks for you to implement, or even take on your infra entirely, if you let us, of course.
Just to roll back a bit to the decision-making process, because the important part, and I think that's why Basecamp is able to pull off such projects so fast, is there are 80 people, so 80 in total. And that includes all engineers, all infra guys, all the marketing designers, everything. And when you're on this size, you're just able to move faster. You can just make decisions without the committee, without like 20 steps of alignment. And if you have also people who work there for like 10 years, I would expect people there are motivated to do the best for the company and for the product, and not to always just push for personal interest because, okay, they tried the cloud and now if it's objectively better to be on-prem, any good professional should vote for this option, even if there's like a big desire to learn more of AWS. And that's also probably what I would in general recommend is to focus on what you are going to achieve at any project or at any job and not on particular technology. Even because during the interview, companies will lie to you about what they use and you'll probably lie a bit about your experience. But in the end, the focus should be on what you will do there. So when I hear like this migration from cloud to on-prem, yes, you're moving from something fancy to something like that is perceived as old, even though it's not old, it's as viable as the cloud. But it's actually pretty cool because it is much cooler to say or to have on your CV something like, I cut the infrastructure costs in half and I saved $1.5 million a year, or I increased performance by 30%. And that's more important than I know how to use EKS and Lambda functions. Like, okay, but if it costs a fortune and it's just shitty spaghetti of like Terraform templates, and what did you achieve?
I agree with you, Kirill, but you need to differentiate depends of what is the position that you have. You know, what I mean is that if you are a manager, an architect, you know, a principal engineer, whatever thing, it's very good to have these things. So I helped the company to save costs in 30-40% in 2 years. We made this movement because maybe even the company want to do this movement from cloud to on-prem. But you know, because all of us, we were at the beginning of our career when you're starting, and you need to have experience in all these acronyms. So, you know, you need to be the guy, the record of acronyms, because you need to have a CV, because this is how normally the companies, you know, the recruiters are working. They have no idea about what is the technology. And there is a company A that is telling to them, I need a person with these 5 acronyms. I need to have EKS, I need to have Lambda, I need to have blah, blah. Okay, Lambda is not acronyms, but you know, you get my point. And then they go to the CV and check if those 5 acronyms are there. Problem, if you go back to on-prem, you start to reduce the number of acronyms related to cloud, at least in all. There is no more cloud acronyms. And the only thing that you have now is maybe you can use, of course, you can use Terraform, but okay, not Terraform in the way that you deploy infra in other way. But, you know, you reduce the number of tools, for sure. What is good for the company, but for the curriculum person is not a good option. So at the end, after 3 years there, 5 years in the same company, you are here, and maybe the cloud goes here. So I'm moving the hands for the people who only hear me. So, and the problem is that at the end is amazing. And if you're telling to me, I prefer to go to this path. I'm with you, but today. But if you are telling to Pablo with 20 years old, I have said to you, okay, I'm happy that you want to do that, but
good luck with that.
I need to find a job yes, good luck. But in the next 2 years, I need to find a job. And I need to have many acronyms and as much acronyms as I can. So, and this is the reality, is how it's working.
So are you saying that this kind of position is only suitable for experienced DevOps engineers and not for beginners? And another question, when you're...
I tell him my experience only. Okay, I'm not telling how the humanity is thinking. I'm only telling my experience that if I were this person with 20 years, I would tell him yes. If I am the person now, I would tell him no. If I am now, if I am an engineer at this age and I receive this job opportunity, I will say yes, for sure. Because it's what Kirill says. You're going to be in one of these momentums. And there are few opportunities to be in one of these momentums. And for me, this is, of course, I go now.
I think the problem for DevOps engineers or like cloud engineers who apply now will be the lack of knowledge of real infrastructure. So if you started like 5 years ago, 3 years ago with AWS, there's a huge chance that you have no idea how anything is actually working. You only know how AWS APIs are working. And then it will be really hard for you to migrate anything anywhere because your knowledge is scoped to one particular cloud. So you know how VPC in AWS is working, but you have no idea how networking is working in general.
Yeah, good point.
You just know how to configure VPC. You know how to start an EKS cluster, but you don't understand that there are nodes, and these nodes are actually virtual machines, and virtual machines are Linux servers with all of the problems. So whenever something tricky happens and you get some strange errors from CRI or from containerd, you'll be lost if you don't have this fundamental knowledge about how operating systems, networking, Linux, and all of this is working. And then you would not be able to migrate anything anywhere, because the on-prem world would be just a complete mystery to you. And it's not advertised enough because, okay, it's not sexy to actually promote enough what's happening in the on-prem world, but there are many cool things happening there as well, technology-wise and software-wise. It just, everyone focuses on the cloud. And I would guess, like, over time, actually, once companies will realize that it may be more profitable to run things on-prem, and I mean, running on-prem today compared to 20 years now is like day and night. I can only speak from 10 years now and today, and it's completely different. How easy it is to manage like hundreds of machines today than it was like 10 years ago, just because of the software and operating system, all these improvements.
And the hardware too.
Yeah. Everything, like imagine like 15 years ago, there was like no proper configuration management. So how do you automate 100 machines like with a little prayer before starting the day?
We go back to Puppet.
Now it's relatively easy if you have like 600, 700 more machines and you have Puppet or Chef, modern versions, it's easy to automate. And if you know how things work, how DNS work, how to configure the networking storage, it's not a big deal. And it's actually not more things to learn compared to the cloud, because in the cloud and then there are like billion things to learn as well. Like just in AWS, the authentication and authorization with IAM it's so complex. AWS has internally scientific papers on this topic explaining how it works with like different theories, what happens if you do this change or not. And I think if this trend continues with companies realizing that they can save lots of money just by moving on-prem, there will be a bigger demand for maybe people with these core skills and not just knowledge of how to use cloud APIs.
How does the company even know like that they need this kind of knowledge from the people when they are hiring one? So they need someone like you who will create prerequisites for the work to be done and for the people that you need to hire, and that's basically the only way for them to do that. Okay, I answered my own question. And do you think you, Kirill and Pablo, you guys are equipped to do this kind of job? Because you're quite experienced, like you're very experienced. And I remember even back in the days when we were running an edtech startup, and Kirill published this article about how network works. And I never been thinking about it, but I've read that articles, and that basically explained to me the concept and the complexity of how all this works. And what surprised me the most is that was the first time when I realized that when you are a programmer, you need to know how this thing works, because it's a part of your job. And before that, I was assuming like you're just making a code, and why should I care about how the internet works? Like it works, right? And why do I need to know that? And then you need to know that, and I think that was the moment when Kirill, from my perspective, when Kirill started to grow knowledge and publish even more knowledge on not just on the programming things, but on the operational things, networking, and how all the things works. And it's growing and growing. And then it started from this small knowledge, and now it's grow to the knowledge of maintaining the data center. So
It's not.
if you...
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
It's not maintained, like you don't need to know how to cable servers, for example. I think today it's kind of, you will not apply this knowledge in most cases unless you work in the data center. It's more about these fundamentals that I personally resisted for many years to really deeply learn them. And then the reason we have these articles is because I started actively learning how all of this works, and it just helps. And it will also help people on the real interview, because yes, if you have a CV which has like 200 AWS services mentioned, you will pass this recruiter stage and you will get to the interview. But could be that in the interview there is actually a good engineer asking you questions, and this engineer will quickly realize that you just lack this deep knowledge, because they'll start digging and like asking more questions like how this works and then what happens there. And this lack of fundamentals will become apparent quite quick. For me, it was always, back in days, the fear during the interviews that someone will ask me, oh, but what's DHCP? And I was like, shit, like I need to learn this now. Just to simulate this kind of questions in your head, even if it's the cloud position, it still helps to know all of these basics. Again, talking back about networking, and I'm not the networking expert. I know enough to like figure things out, but it just changes understanding how networking works. And you have a networking issue on AWS or Google Cloud, it changes your thinking from how do I configure transit gateway, or like how do I change my Terraform code, to actually what happens, how the traffic is actually going from point A to B. And once you go from this bottom level, it's way easier to understand what's happening and which parts are misconfigured.
You need to understand too that if you check, for example, these days, the people under 30 or 32 that ever have been in a data center, so you can get that only maybe 2% or 5%. And when I say a data center, I mean a data center, a real data center, something big with thousands of machines, maybe 2%. And this idea of you don't need to go there anymore, okay, it could be okay, but you need to understand the machine, because, for example, when you have this big machine based in slides, so because the hardware is a slide that you plug every slice of the machine, so at the end you have a big box with 16 of those slices, and every one of these slices is a machine, for example, for VMware or something like that. When some of those is cracking, you need to understand that there is a failure, that there is a problem. And maybe you don't need to go there to the data center to unplug this one, but you need to understand that there is something different now. Now there is hardware, and this hardware is broken. And now you need to request a new hardware, and now maybe you are not allowed, but there should be a person who needs to put all the frame in maintenance, and then you need to do this maintenance. So sometimes you need to do a real maintenance. So mean the lower part, and really this is happening during the weekend. So and we back again to these all weekends and nights that the people were doing this maintenance, because at the end you need to change. Maybe some person is changing the hardware. You don't need to go to the data center, but you need to do an operative on there. And for example, what Kirill was telling, Puppet and Chef. Puppet was used, I remember, many years ago. So, and Puppet was something like, if you talk with people now about Puppet, nobody's using Puppet because, okay, nobody that is working in the cloud is using Puppet, because you don't need to use Puppet, because Puppet was something created really to be used when you are in on-prem, to deploy components, to create users, but everything on because you are not creating hardware like what is happening hardware, on quotes. It's not that, but when you are in a cloud environment, you go with Terraform and says, okay, I'm going to create a VPC. I'm going to create, and you create different objects. Here you have the number of NICs that you have in your machine is there. So there are no more NICs. The number of CPUs is there. There are no more CPUs. So you cannot create more CPUs in a machine. So at the end, this is the different way that you work. You are working with the static requirements, but even on top you have another virtualization. But when I'm talking about the lower layer, is what it is. And this is hard to discuss with the people and explain, this is what we have. There is nothing else. So there is no magic here. No, it's not going to appear magically new machines. When we don't have a space, we need to make a call and says, hey, I need a new machine. And then you need to bring the new machine, you need to pay the machine, you need to cable the machine.
Several months later.
Weeks, yes, but you need to do a hard work because even you need to connect to switches and you need to connect to routers and you need to check the hardware, the disk, because maybe you have a NetApp and you need to connect to the NetApp. And then depends if you have a NAS or you have a SAN, depends what you have. You need to start to connect all this relation with this new machine that maybe is now connected, imagine, to a VMware or is connected to something else or whatever other virtualization. And then you need to inject. It's not...
You just described that the idea of upscaling or downscaling that infrastructure could be a massive pain in the ass.
But the beautiful thing about modern infrastructure is that we do all of this with Kubernetes in the cloud, which is lots of people don't realize is that now you have Kubernetes, the best thing in the world. You run it on the cloud. And what do? When you want to run the pod, your pod is limited to the size of your node. So you need to always calculate how many NICs or elastic interfaces your node has, how many memory and CPU the node has. It's actually it's hard to explain to people how it was with the hardware and VMs on top. But if you just tell them, it's actually pretty similar what you currently do with Kubernetes if you refuse to do something serverless with Kubernetes. Because in the end, you have VMs, on top you have containers. So you have the same capacity sandwich that you need to carefully configure and maintain. Only difference is that it auto-scales, presumably to infinity on the cloud and underlying nodes, but it's lots of work to do to properly automate it and not go bankrupt from misconfiguration of this kind of setup. And there are lots of open source tools just to make this scaling happening. And even those tools, they don't remove the need for you to properly configure all of your pods and deployments to actually be properly placed on the nodes so that they don't exceed the memory or disk size or anything else. I think it's beautiful that on Kubernetes level, we just stepped back 10 years in terms of capacity and resource management and did not even realize this. It's Kubernetes is good. We can just, it will schedule everything for me. No, it does nothing for you in terms of capacity management, zero. You have to do all the calculation, all the things yourself.
Because this was, I remember many years ago, this was one of the problems with Kubernetes when Kubernetes appeared. The people were telling why I want to have Kubernetes, because at the end, the limit of the pod is the machine. So where the pod is running. So I prefer to have a machine. I put Docker or whatever when you were talking about containers, and I started machine why I need Kubernetes. So, and I think that Kubernetes exploded when the cloud appeared, because if you back again, because the people start to forget what it was the pod running. So it's something okay, I don't care. So there is something magic. It's because there is a limit. I don't know why is this limit, but really it's a machine where you need to put a limit and you need to tell this is from here to here. And it's the same happened with OpenShift. OpenShift exploded as soon as the cloud appeared.
But that's why, because originally it was and still the best use case for Kubernetes and OpenShift is for you to run something on-prem. In the cloud, if you start thinking about it makes zero fucking sense to run it in the cloud. Except that, standards, deployments, all these concepts are great. In terms of simplifying how you run workloads, it's just a nightmare. If you have a physical data center and you can just run Kubernetes on top of bare metal, you don't have two layers, you have just pods and resources and the physical node. So then you can figure out the scheduling, then it works beautifully and really fast without any extra layer. When you run it in the cloud, again, you have hardware from AWS, you have VMs on top with your nodes, and you have Kubernetes on top. So all of this, two layers of scheduling, one is handled by AWS, another one by you. It's just the least cloudy way to run things, right? It's you have Lambda, you have Fargate and things like this, which are actually serverless and a step forward. And for me, Kubernetes in this way is just makes such little sense in terms of running workloads. Again, it makes sense because it's an API. So every Kubernetes cluster is more or less the same. It's actually Ruby on Rails, right? So every Ruby on Rails project, if you go into the source code, you know where to find everything. Kubernetes did kind of the same for infrastructure. If you go to Kubernetes cluster, there are namespaces, there are deployments, there are pods. You know how to find things. It's all standard. You can standardize things, and it's a powerful API. But to actually schedule workloads, to run containers, it's a huge step backwards. Zero innovation on this front.
This is funny because when Pablo were talking about we're describing what you need to do while working with on-premise infrastructure. I was thinking about that. This is completely like entirely different kind of DevOps job than what we got used to. But now, after Kirill explaining how Kubernetes work and that you have to basically do the same kind, I started thinking that it's not that kind, that not that different. Do you think that the same person who maintains cloud infrastructure will be capable of maintaining your infrastructure on premise? Like, is this the same kind of person, or they still need to have different kind of skill sets?
It's not given that the same person will be able to maintain this. It's like hit or miss. Depends on the person.
Yeah. And then the virtualization that you're using, and depends in many things, because they need to virtualize in some way. I had to mind that they are going to virtualize. So they jump from AWS. I think it was AWS, no, Kirill?
Mm-hmm.
They jump from AWS, that it was doing the virtualization for them. They jump from AWS to their own virtualization. So they need a new person or group of person, or the same person with a new knowledge to be able to do this virtualization, something that it was done before in AWS. They need a number of people taking care of the hardware. Okay, not that it's monitoring, but now the monitoring is not doing the same monitor as before. Now you need to monitor really for example, if the NAS is full, it's your NAS. It's not AWS NAS. So if the NetApp is, imagine the switches. If you have a problem in the switches, you need to update the switches, the routers. The problem with the routers with the BGP, you need to consider that. So the firewalls, you are the owner of your own firewalls. So at the end, you need people to take care of all these things. And there are two things. So you can do the best thing to do is you take your team, network team, and says, okay, now you're going to learn how it's working that. Now you take your storage team. Maybe there were not a storage team, because I always been working in companies many years ago. Always there were a network team and a storage team. And now you need a storage team, because storage needs to have switches. And you need to have switches for the storage, and you need to learn how it's working on NetApp. Or maybe you can talk with NetApp or whatever the company, and then you can hire external people. But you need different roles. It's true that, for example, when you're talking about if they have everything in Kubernetes, but it was monolithic team. So in this, the developers are going to be the same, because at the end, this is an encapsulation of the same code in the same place. So, but everything under, at least the knowledge is different. It's completely different. Mm-hmm. And but, you're not using tools like, for example, we're talking, you start to use Puppet. You're not using Terraform anymore. For example, I don't see a reason to use Terraform. You can, but
unless you have virtualization, and then you can still use Terraform.
Exactly.
And that's also one of the things that, like, if you actually want to have the latest and greatest in terms of infrastructure software, you will never get it on AWS. Even if you look at Kubernetes, I think like the latest Kubernetes version is 128 to 127, and the latest one available on AWS is one behind. So plus lots of the components behind AWS services are also built on open source tech. So if you really want latest and greatest to be like the coolest kid on the block, you will not get it from AWS. You will actually get it from using the open source software that a majority of this is powers AWS and other clouds. That's maybe like another like argument to convince people why doing on-prem is not so horrible. Because actually, if you're interested in doing everything new and modern, then AWS is not the way to go. Like you'll wait for like the AWS. I think now it has, but there was a company called Adjust. They're the mobile, like some kind of marketing company for like automation for marketing, like with tracking pixels. And they had a really great talk from the CTO, and this was like 9 years ago. They were telling why they're not using AWS. And the guy was telling, well, we pay 3 times less on-prem, plus for our use case, we need Anycast. There is no Anycast on AWS. So what do? We need Anycast. Like that's our requirement as a like from our software. And AWS just does not offer Anycast in their networking solution. So that's it. And if you have these tricky use cases, you'll hit these limitations also pretty fast. What's interesting now is that you could replicate or like get same kind of infra as AWS, maybe on a smaller scale for your own company, because the hardware was the same, but now it's not anymore because AWS started making their own processors, which makes things way more interesting because it's not about software anymore. Because now they make these Graviton processors, already generation 3, which is like Apple Silicon, just for infrastructure. And I think Google also started doing this hardware, the processor just for the data centers. And now it's harder to replicate, but depends on how good these processors are and if you cannot find similar ones from companies who sell hardware and processors to your own data center. Because you will not be able to order Graviton from AWS. They build it for their own use cases.
Let's try to summarize a little bit. And you guys who are listening, us on the Spotify or YouTube, you are take notes because this will be useful for you. So when a person is looking to like secure any kind of position for themselves, they need, and we try to unwrap it layer by layer. For example, if they know AWS or any other Azure, GCP or whatever, they need not only understand how this works, but it would be better for them to understand how all the open source tools that are running on AWS also working, to be able to apply for the job where the company is looking to be the coolest guy on the block and work with the most recent software. On top of that, you need to know how virtualization works and how all the not understand but be able to run a virtual machine without using AWS or Google Cloud Platform, something like that. And if we go even on an even more basic level, you need to understand how networking works. Roughly, the idea looks like that. Is that correct? Or did I miss something?
You need to keep in mind all the layers involved in the infrastructure, from application to the bottom. You don't need to be an expert in all these things. You don't need to be an absolute expert in networking. But you need to be aware there are many layers beneath your cloud and how they fit together and how they work. And that's important just for work to understand this business piece. Even if it never happens on the interview, it will actually just make you more productive and effective.
Do you have this kind of knowledge? Like, do you indicate this in your CV when you are talking with companies like this year?
From my side, it becomes less and less relevant during the interviews. Because people like, you want to use AWS Lambda. Okay, so there will be probably on the interview or discussion with the customer, there will be no questions about networking setup. Just for some trickier projects, yes, but in most cases, no. It does not appear that often. I remember like some years ago for one financial service provider here in Munich, they had a requirement for people to have Red Hat Certified Engineer certification because they were doing, and they still do lots of on-prem, like really good automated on-prem that you have like 1,000 of machine, 1,000 or more of machines with like a handful of people maintaining this. And then they required actually understanding how low-level things and how Linux is working. But if you're starting now and you're targeting to work with the cloud, I would still probably focus on learning how the cloud works and just plan also understanding fundamentals over the long term. Because again, like in my case, I started really focusing on this part maybe like 5-6 years into my career and not from the start. It just many situations where you realize actually like I lack this knowledge and I would benefit from having this. So planning to get this knowledge slowly or accumulate it is very helpful.
Okay, cool. So guys, I hope you took these notes. And if you need some kind of help figuring this out, you are always can send us a message. The easiest way to do that is to be subscribed to our MKDev Dispatch newsletter. And whenever you get a news update, just hit a reply button and feel free to discuss whatever you read and ask us questions, or maybe even order some kind of consultation, and we will be happy to give you advices or anything else. And if you are a company that are looking to into something, okay, whatever, people, knowledge, infrastructure migration, just book a call with us and we will discuss this with you extensively. And for you, Kirill and Pablo, I would like to thank you for all the information that you provided to our listeners. And this was interesting personally for me because I've learned a lot. Thank you guys for being here with me. And I see you in 2 weeks in the next episode.
Thank you, Leo. We love you.
Number 16 next time. See you.
There are no challenges that we couldn't overcome. Whether it is immediate infrastructure problems or planning a future project, we won't simply answer your questions. We become a part of your team to help you complete the mission. Our solutions consider the interests of your business and the combined expertise of the industry, as our staff is made up of more than a dozen experts in different areas who share decades of field-tested experience and knowledge with you.